What's going on, everyone? It's Evan with Lions, Bulls, and Bears, back for another episode of Crypto Courage, and let's get into it, because today's gonna have to do with cryptocurrency a little bit, but it's gonna have a lot to do with just economics and the changing monetary system. All right, so let's get back into it. So, it's just hard to know where to start with this one because there's just so much to talk about. So right now, a lot of people are under the impression that Joe Biden is the president-elect and is going to become president, in January. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Trump is going to be sworn in for a second term on January, despite what it may look like right now. So, a lot of this could change if Biden becomes president. So, yeah, but either way, I think there is a big change going on. And I think that the Great Reset, as it's being called, is part of a Hegelian dialectic that is the solution for the problem that was COVID. I think COVID, and I could be wrong, and, take everything I say with a grain of salt. I'm no expert in these type of things, so but this is just how I see it. Anyway, I think COVID was there is some truth to it being a plandemic, as this was, I think this was planned. I think the I'm not sure about the virus, if it was let out or something like that, but the elite never let a good crisis go to waste. That's a quote from, can't remember who it was, someone in the Obama administration. Is either the Chicago mayor, I can't remember his name exactly, or I just don't want to butcher it, and then or Eric Holder, someone, they're talking about never letting a good crisis go to waste.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before.
So yeah, I think that they created a lot of hysteria and fear, like I've said in previous videos, to get people to give up a lot of their liberties, and also to provide cover for the collapsing of their unsustainable system that they built, that they've had I think a plan for a long time. I mean, you could just look at the 1988 cover of The Economist to go to a new system, and they do this. So a lot of people maybe are familiar with Peter Schiff. He's been calling for a return to the gold standard for a long time.
And we went off the gold standard in 1971, but I think the world is going to go back on it because I think the days where the dollar is the reserve currency are numbered, and we're going back to basics. Everything old is new again. Gold was money in the past, and it will be money again in the future. And central banks that are smart enough to read that writing on the wall are increasing their gold reserves now.
Also, you might be familiar with James Rickards. He's also been calling for a return to the gold standard.
Right now, there's not a central bank in the world that wants a gold standard. Not one. They hate it. But they may be forced to go to it or something like it, because if confidence is lost in government money and fiat money, they may have to turn to gold, not because they want to, but because they have to restore confidence.
It having something to do with, the World Bank or the IMF or some of these, larger world banks to bail out the Fed and with their SDR, yes, which stands for special drawing right, some sort of world money. And I'm going to do another separate video on world money versus national money versus community money versus sound money. So I think that's going to be the title of my next video. Yeah, there's just so much to cover in this. So I just want to start off with giving some shout out to some really good channels covering this issue, and definitely check these channels out. Number one would be Unchained podcast. Number two, I'd say, would be Chico Crypto. He has done a bunch of excellent videos on the coming digital dollar. Another one I would say would be Bix Weir, Road to Ruta, and we'll get more into his Road to Ruta theory and how that ties into all of this. Another one I would recommend is Bitcoin Ben. Also, another channel that I think is a few more channels that I think are doing a great job covering this is The Bearable Bull. Another channel called Bonfire Guy, and then X22 Report, who has since been kicked off of YouTube, and you could go to x22report.com to find his content there. So yeah, those are some good channels to check out. Especially Unchained did a good interview with the former CFTC, I think commissioner is the title, Chris Giancarlo, who is who's been called Crypto Dad.
Chris has been working on something really big since leaving the CFTC, which is the Digital Dollar Project, which is a partnership between the Digital Dollar Foundation, which, Chris, you founded with your brother, Charles Giancarlo, and with David Gorfine, who's the CEO of Gattaca Horizons, which is a fintech advisory firm. And Daniel also was the former chief innovation officer of the CFTC, and Accenture is also part of this partnership. So what are you proposing?
We're proposing a full-blown U.S. central bank digital currency, a tokenized, decentralized form of the U.S. dollar that would be a bearer instrument, but in digital format, that would be as valuable on your mobile device wallet as is in your leather wallet in your pocket.
Some of these channels that I recommended are very patriotic and pro-Trump, and also follow, like I said in my last video, the operation that is the 17th letter of the alphabet. And I have mixed feelings on all three of those things: patriotism, Trump, and that operation. So anyway, that's a whole nother video, but that I'm not even interested in making. I'm just unfortunate it all ties it, so it all actually ties in and is connected. So politics and economics and all this is definitely connected. So we will be covering it as it pertains to economics and cryptocurrency, but yeah, I'm not trying to mix in a bunch of conspiracy theory. But I like to listen to all and follow none, and it's real unfortunate that a lot of people are being censored and not their voices are being silenced, and I think that's all very politically motivated. And I think we'll see a lot of change come to social media platforms, and that will be covered in my one of my upcoming videos on all the social media censorship. Anyway, so basically, check out all those channels I recommended, because I'm going to be referencing some of them in here. So yeah, it's my belief that Trump, and X22 has been saying this, has been outsmarting, outmaneuvering, controlling the Fed, and as well as the markets and other things. And but yeah, Trump was calling for lower rates, and once the COVID happened, Jerome Powell finally did what Trump had been calling for a long time and lowered rates. I think we're going to see more stimulus, and I think that I think we're going to see improvement in the voting system, and all that's going to have to do with blockchain technology. So the voting, I think we're going to get voter ID, and you'll have to have ID to vote, and voting will be blockchain technology will be integrated to provide a trustless system that anyone can audit and verify, or that is more secure than the current one. I think the next round of stimulus will be have something to do with this new digital dollar that's coming. A lot of people have been calling for a return to the gold standard. There's some clips of Trump saying we have lots of gold, and if you follow Bixweir's work, he talks about a lot of gold in the Grand Canyon, so much that in fact that's why they created the Federal Reserve in 1913, was because of the massive amounts of gold found in the Grand Canyon. This ties into his Road to Ruta theory that Alan Greenspan, who's a gold bug, is has this plan of returning us, and good guys within the Fed have a plan of returning us to the gold standard. And both Donald Trump and who I think will be the next Fed chair is Judy Shelton, are both gold bugs and fans and proponents of a gold standard and gold as money. So and that's evident in Donald Trump's tweet after the Libra hearings, or during the Libra hearings, because what happened is fintech threatened the central banking in the money power. So that threatens the banks, but it also threatens government, because both of those get a lot of their power from having the world reserve currency. So I'll check out Naomi Brockwell's videos from the Libra hearings. They're really good.
I am not a fan of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, which are not money, and whose value is highly volatile and based on thin air. Unregulated crypto assets can facilitate unlawful behavior, including drug trade and other illegal activity. Similarly, Facebook Libra's virtual currency will have little standing or dependability. If Facebook and other companies want to become a bank, they must seek a new banking charter and become subject to all banking regulations, just like other banks, both national and international. We have only one real currency in the USA, and it is stronger than ever, both dependable and reliable. It is by far the most dominant currency anywhere in the world, and it will always stay that way. It is called the United States dollar.
Fintech and Mark Zuckerberg specifically, I think threaten the power of the central banks and of Donald Trump. I actually think Donald Trump, this could be incorrect, but I'll play a clip from it too. In one of Bonfire Guy's videos, they get into how Trump actually went to the Vatican and had the Vatican turned over control of all the world's or most of the world's central banks, I guess, were controlled by the Vatican, and now Trump controls them. So Trump, if this is true, Trump is the most powerful person to have ever existed, because he is in control of the Fed, and he's in control of the United States military, and he's in control of all the other world's central banks.
Vatican, and he presents to Pope Francis a massive, apparently the folder was absolutely huge, and handed it over to them and said, yeah, you know, take your time, have a look-see. Apparently Trump kept making little digs at Pope Francis about his red shoes. Yeah, you might want to put your red shoes on when you look at all of this stuff. And so that's what Trump is saying. I'm not leaving here until you sign some documents for me. It took the Vatican that night, and the next day they capitulated. And they symbolically signed off. Now, what did the Vatican have to do to sign off? You see, the Fed is controlled by a certain group within the Catholic Church. Who went forth and spread the teachings of Christianity? The Jesuits!
When is a central bank not a central bank? When is a private bank public and a public bank private? Sound mysterious and full of secrets? Well, that's the Vatican Bank.
Is in 1929 they hit a deal with Mussolini, the head of the fascist state. He recognized them as a real country, that little piece of land, and in return gave them about $1 billion in today's money, compensating them for the loss of the Papal States. They said, what do we do with $1 billion? We're clerics, not financiers. They hired a guy who was a brilliant financial whiz, Bernardino Nogaro. He came in. He understood arbitrage, he understood offshore banking, he understood how to move hard assets around, investments in real estate, and he started to do that. In the middle of World War II, he said to the Pope, I need a bank. It's not enough to have correspondent banks. We need to move our money off the radar so the British and Americans can't follow what we're doing, because they were playing both sides. The Americans and Brits they were investing in, and the Germans and Italians. They didn't know who would win. They wanted to make sure they were covered. And that's the birth of the Vatican Bank. They go from an institution that can't embrace capitalism to one that suddenly has its own bank in the middle of the war.
They were in control of the Fed. So Trump did not leave until Pope Francis issued a papal bull announcing that by a certain date, the Vatican Bank, which was in charge of all, was the head executor, the exchequer of all of the earth-wide Federal Reserve banking systems in each country, would be handed over to one Donald J. Trump. Donald J. Trump is not, Mark, just the executor, the exchequer of the U.S. Treasury and therefore the Fed within the United States. He is the exchequer for Earth.
So, I think Mark Zuckerberg kind of threatened that, and that's why you see Donald Trump's tweets, and you saw a lot of new regulations for cryptocurrency exchanges and platforms. I think Libra was a catalyst for a lot of the upcoming regulatory changes and stuff you already saw. Caitlin Long was on Pomp's show, and they covered this at great length. So check that out. And Andreas Antonopoulos just put out a great video on some of the upcoming changes, and also Bearable Bulls covering it really well. So I think there's going to be some big changes in cryptocurrency, but we'll get into that in my next video. But I think central bank digital currencies are coming. James Corbett did a great video on the Great Reset. He does a good segment on central bank digital currencies.
And this is key. Money itself is changing. We expect it to become more convenient, more user-friendly, perhaps even less serious looking. We expect it to be integrated with social media, readily available for online and person-to-person use, including micropayments. And of course, we expect it to be cheap, safe, protected against criminals and prying eyes. So, what role will remain for cash in this digital world? There are already signs in some shop windows. Cash not accepted.
So that is Christine Lagarde talking about how the transformation of fintech, financial technology, will be affected by this digital revolution and how it is changing the nature of money itself, or at least what the central bankers of the world call money, which may be a different thing altogether, but it is certainly going to impact each and every one of us, as the central banks around the world are now busily and determinedly looking into and starting their plans for bringing into existence central bank digital currencies. So the first question that I'm sure everyone will have when encountering that term is, what is a central bank digital currency? And right off the bat, as you can tell from the name, there are two key features that we know that are implicit in the concept of CBDC. One is that it is central bank issued or controlled in some key sense, and the second is that it's digital. So we know that much, at least, about whatever gets passed off as CBDC, and there will presumably be many different forms of CBDCs in many different countries, because they will all be implemented in slightly different ways. But anyway, those core features obviously need to be core features in order for it to count as a CBDC. But other than that, it's details schmetails. I mean, we'll work that out. And don't worry, the bankers are, as I say, busily working on that behind the scenes in the white papers that, of course, are, again, openly available. It's the open conspiracy. There's nothing taking place in shadowy rooms here. They're openly talking about it. They're just issuing boring white papers that 1 in 1 million people will actually bother to read. So most people are uninformed about this subject. But what form these CBDCs actually end up taking is very much up for grabs, or at least is up for the decision of the technocrats who are seeking right now, in fact, are carving out a new monetary order right under our noses.
The Great Reset, which is a term that the World Economic Forum started using. As I mentioned before, they don't let a good opportunity go to waste.
It's a historical moment, a time, not only to fight severe virus, but to shape the system.
We have a unique but rapidly shrinking window of opportunity to learn lessons and reset ourselves on a more sustainable path. It is an opportunity we have never had before and may never have again. So we must use all the levers we have at our disposal, knowing that each and every one of us has a vital role to play.
Now is the time to think what history would say about this crisis. And now is the time for all of us to define our own role. What is it that would make it so that history would look at this crisis as the great opportunity for reset?
So they are taking advantage of this pandemic crisis, which is really cover for the financial crisis. X22 and Bearable Bull both do a good job of covering this. You know, X22 says that, you know, they wanted, and a lot of other people have said this, so that they would, you know, use a war to distract everybody and blame, you know, the depression on the war. I don't think the war scenario panned out, and so they had to pivot and go toward the pandemic route, and that's why when you see Bill Gates' speeches from before this all popped off, like everything's happening exactly how you know, he forecasted. So
when I was a kid, the disaster we worried about most was a nuclear war. That's why we had a barrel like this down in our basement filled with cans of food and water. When the nuclear attack came, we were supposed to go downstairs, hunker down, and eat out of that barrel. Today, the greatest risk of global catastrophe doesn't look like this. Instead, it looks like this. If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war.
It reminds me of before 9/11, there was a document calling for a new Pearl Harbor event to get us into all these wars in the Middle East, and that, Americans wouldn't go along with the wars, without some catastrophic event like that. And so, to me, Bill Gates' speech reminds me a lot of that, in that this is, there's some truth to it being planned, or, part of some sort of overall being used as taking advantage of people's fears, and a lot of fear mongering involved with this. Anyway, it's you've seen a lot of businesses have banned cash, and I think we're going cashless, and that is connected to negative interest rates, because you can't have negative interest rates if we have cash, and they ultimately want negative interest rates. So, and that's where we're going, is fully cashless, fully digital dollar. Like I mentioned earlier, James Rickards has been calling for a new Bretton Woods event, essentially a Bretton Woods 2.0, and
Bretton Woods 2.0. Now, it should be a fairly non-controversial observation that when the managing director of the International Monetary Fund uses the current crisis and the resulting economic, social, and political upheaval to take to the global virtual pulpit that has been afforded to her and invoke the memory of Bretton Woods, the historically literate amongst us realize that we in the general public are being prepared for a world historical transition.
Reflecting on the dramatic change in the world over the last year, I paid a visit to Bretton Woods in New Hampshire, where 44 men signed our Articles of Agreement in 1944. Our founders faced two massive tasks: to deal with the immediate devastation caused by the war, and to lay the foundation for a more peaceful, more prosperous post-war world. At the conclusion of the conference, John Maynard Keynes captured the significance of international cooperation as hope for the world. If we can continue, the brotherhood of men will have become more than a phrase, he said. We face what I have called a long ascent for the global economy, a climb that will be difficult, uneven, uncertain, and prone to setbacks. But it is a climb up, and we will have a chance to address some persistent problems: low productivity, slow growth, high inequalities, a looming climate crisis. We can do better than build back the pre-pandemic world. We can build forward to a world that is more resilient, sustainable, and inclusive. We must seize this new Bretton Woods moment.
So central bank digital currencies are coming. How it's all going to work out is nobody knows, and a bunch of really smart people have a bunch of really good opinions, and it'll be interesting to see what how Bitcoin will play a role, how gold will play a role. It's my belief that we're going back to a gold standard. There's a good clip from Judy Shelton that I'll play about returning to a gold standard. That's where I actually got the title of the video, was from this clip.
Turning to a gold standard help the U.S. economy? Can you talk a little about your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say I don't see it so much as returning, but more of a back to the future.
Okay.
I think that what a gold standard stands for is monetary discipline for its own sake. That is, if money is supposed to be a unit of account, and a reliable measure and a dependable store of value, it really shouldn't be subject to who's the chairman of the Federal Reserve. And I think that money needs to be stable and provide the foundation for productive economic growth. And when money is just a variable that financial markets toss around, or it's part of a derivatives formula, or it's part of someone speculating on currencies, it's not serving the private sector in the sense of providing that reliable unit of account so you can make plans. And under a gold standard, you did have that stability, and I think that's what's missing. And so I like the idea of a gold standard. I mean, it could be used in a very cryptocurrency way. The point is, do you have a unified money system so that when you talk about the international marketplace, everyone is playing on a level monetary playing field? And it's very important to have a rules-based approach. And that's why I'm advocating that we need to look at the virtues of a gold standard and try to come up with something much closer to matching those, and then I think we would have more solid economic growth.
Where she talks about returning to a gold standard in a cryptocurrency kind of way. And so, yeah, I think gold will play a role. Also, it reminds me of, like I mentioned in a previous video, of Tyler Jenks, who I recently found out he got it from Savadine, who wrote the Bitcoin Standard, that we would return to gold. I think eventually Bitcoin will win out and replace gold as a superior store of value and is actually harder money. I think Savadine is right. Potentially not. It might not be the case, but he thinks that, governments will have to go back to a gold standard in order to kind of prevent this from Bitcoin just taking
for this. Awesome. So this is going to be an in-depth discussion on the existential topic of Bitcoin versus the gold standard. Existential in this context means the death of Bitcoin. So in your interview with Jeff Deist at the Mises Institute, Tyler heard you say, and quoted in our last show, that you think the most likely scenario if you want to kill off Bitcoin is to restore the gold standard. So in your book, I kind of went back and I found this. So I'm going to read really quickly, which is, and yes, I'm being kind of lame. Hypothetically, if the entire world's banking and monetary systems were replaced with those of the gold standard in the late 19th century, where individual freedom and hard money were paramount, the demand for Bitcoin would likely subside significantly. It might just be the case that such a move would cause a large enough reduction in demand for Bitcoin that brings its price significantly down, hurting current holders significantly, increasing the volatility of the currency, and setting it back many years. With the increased volatility and availability of a reliable and relatively stable hard money international monetary standard, the incentive for using Bitcoin drops significantly. In a world in which government's restrictions and inflationary tendencies are disciplined by the gold standard, it might just be the case that gold's first mover advantage and relative purchasing power stability would constitute an insurmountable hurdle for Bitcoin to overcome by depriving Bitcoin of the fast growth in users and thus preventing it from reaching a large enough size with any semblance of stability in price.
I could see a world where central banks hold Bitcoin, but maybe not. Why would anybody use a currency issued by government when they could just use Bitcoin itself? So it's really interesting to think about, but I think that we are going to get a reset of the monetary system. So I'm going to try to go through my notes because I've been all over the place, but like I said, I think Trump has Andrew Jackson hanging on the wall behind him because I think Trump is in a battle with the central banks and ultimately is going to kill the bank in the spirit of Andrew Jackson. Like Andrew Jackson, And like also Abraham Lincoln and JFK, they all made, Benjamin Franklin, they all issued currency that wasn't debt-based currency. With Lincoln it was the greenbacks. Kennedy had a silver, a plan to return us to silver standard, and was going to issue notes based on silver, I believe. So I think that if you look carefully at Trump's tweets, he mentions the United States dollar, which that could change. That doesn't always have to be the Federal Reserve note. So because of the pandemic, Trump was given a lot of power because we're in a state of emergency, and he was actually able to make the Fed part of the Treasury. And I think you're going to see the new United States dollar will be issued by the Treasury, and won't, and neither the Fed will I don't know if the Fed will still be around, or if it will, how that's all going to work. I think it's going to be, it is now controlled by the Treasury, from what I hear. So Trump and a lot of other people, have a vested interest in keeping the United States, the currency, the reserve currency. So they're going to keep fighting for that. But we'll see. Bitcoin could just take over and become the new standard, and level the playing field by itself. So, but there's a good clip from Trump, speaking of level the playing field, talking about a leveling of the playing field.
And President, you have repeatedly stated about China taking on the currency, foreign exchange policies which are not good for the United States. Do you think that eventually it will change in the future?
I had a very, very good conversation, as most of you know, yesterday with the president of China. It was a very, very warm conversation. I think we are on the process of getting along very well, and I think that will also be very much of a benefit to Japan. So we had a very, very good talk last night, and discussed a lot of subject. It was a long talk, and we are working on that as we speak. We have conversations with various representatives of China. I believe that will all work out very well for everybody: China, Japan, the United States, and everybody in the region. As far as the currency devaluations, I've been complaining about that for a long time. And I believe that we will all eventually, and probably very much sooner than a lot of people understand or think, we will be all at a level playing field. Because that's the only way it's fair. That's the only way that you can fairly compete in trade and other things. And we will be on that field, and we will all be working very hard to do great for our country. But it has to be fair, and we will make it fair.
And he says that it's going to happen sooner than most people realize. And I think we're all going to return to, I think he's hinting at a gold standard. And if you listen to Judy Shelton in that clip I was talking about, she talks about it too, leveling the monetary playing field. So, yeah, I think personally XRP is going to play a role. I think the bearable bull's spot on. I think both, both sides, as Bitcoin Ben calls them, the nationalists and the globalists. Bitcoin Ben doesn't think they'll use XRP, but I think the bearable bull's right, and I think both sides are going to use XRP as the plumbing for their central bank digital currency, or for their world money. So I don't know for sure, but I think it's looking that way because XRP's been working with the regulators from the beginning, and yeah, I think XRP is poised to do well because it's going to be the plumbing for the new monetary system.
Now, this is a time when Americans are depending on their banking system more than they ever have before. When we made a decision collectively in this country to shut down the economy very broadly back in March, we depended on the banks to deliver benefit payments in the form of paycheck protection program loans and checks sent from the Treasury Department. And the problem is we were sending those across 19th century banking rails. Many people said that it took days or sometimes weeks to receive their payments. And my vision is that we need to get to a place in this country where payments can be transmitted virtually instantaneously, where errors can be eliminated. And it turns out technology exists today that can help us do that. So we need to get there, I think, sooner rather than later.
SWIFT. Some people will recognize this term, others won't, but it's the way right now that the system works and the information, the money is passed between banks, and the last thing it is SWIFT. It's clunky, it's slow. Those outside of the industry, particularly in the fintech sector, know there are better options. Brian, is this the plan to replace, improve on the existing infrastructure that SWIFT is at this moment?
Well, Julia, you make a great point that SWIFT is one of the most ironically named organizations in the world. The joke in my world is that if you wanted to move money from America to Australia, the fastest way to do that is to load it in a suitcase and put it on an airplane.
I remember actually, you and I were both at Davos, and someone early on in my arrival there, someone was like, crypto's still a bad word here. I was like, and
it's a misunderstood word.
It is, and I think a lot of what I'm doing and a lot of what I did in Davos is meeting with regulators, meeting with very senior people at banks and explaining to them how crypto can be used, how specifically XRP can be used to solve a real problem. Not to circumvent regulation, not to circumvent any government. And I think once people understand that, they very quickly become disarmed. It's no longer a bad word.
Do they understand when you're talking, and you've sort of shifted the focus to on-demand liquidity and these cross-border transactions and facilitating faster, more efficient payments? Can they get a grip with that, perhaps more than the rest of it? Because I think for me that's something that, particularly from my view, is they get and understand.
Yeah, that is absolutely the case. And even in Davos, to be able to start to talk about that and put numbers on it. Today, last week, we did $54 million of XRP flows into Mexico. That's 7.5% of all flow from US dollar to Mexican peso.
You were 7% of the market.
Last week. And that's up from maybe 3% in December. So this is growing very quickly. And look, these are huge industries that can be made massively more efficient by using these new technologies. But I think it goes back to what we said earlier. Like you have to focus on a real problem, a real customer, and drive that utility.
This change is coming, and how outdated the old system, the current system we're using, is for payments, settlement, and it's just the clunky, slow system that is outdated and is going to be updated here really soon. So I don't know exactly if we're going to get world money or a new US dollar. I think both are coming. So like SDR and the new dollar, I don't know exactly, but I don't think anybody does. I mean, some people do. Some people definitely know what's about to happen for sure. But like I said, there's a lot of smart people with some good ideas and good things to say. But I think Trump is against the U.S. joining the Great Reset, what the World Economic Forum is calling the Great Reset. And I think Biden is fully on board with the Great Reset. So, so if Biden gets in, we may not see the return to a gold standard, at least in the U.S. I think a lot of countries will be returning to gold, and maybe the world money gold might play a role, a component of the basket of currencies. It might be a bunch of other currencies and gold. I don't know, other commodities potentially. But I think when oil went negative to negative $41 a barrel or whatever, something like that, was the death of the petrodollar. I also think that's why Trump is ending all the wars in the Middle East, is because there's no longer any need for the petrodollar. And yeah, I think we're going to go back to a gold standard, and that there's lots of gold in the US, more than we admit. And like I said, Bix Weir's covered this. Yeah, check out Trump's speeches from Davos and from the UN, where he pretty much talks about a leveling of the playing field and how each country is going to need to take care of its people. And I think he is opposed to this great reset. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, who gets sworn in on January, who will be, what's going to happen with the Fed, who's going to be the next Fed chair, and yeah, how this reset is all going to happen, if there's going to be a big crash of the economy, if there's going to be reflation of the bubble, if they're going to be able to smoothly transition us. I mean, I think that's what we're experiencing, is a transition and the death of the old system and the rollout of a new. Just what form that's going to take, no one really knows. So it's a topic I'm very fascinated with and covering, watching closely, and we'll be covering with you guys more as it unfolds. I just wanted to kind of get my opinions out there on what I think is going to happen. I do think we will see another Bretton Woods type moment, like Jim Rickards has been saying, and like the head of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, is calling for. And yeah, we'll see what happens. Leave your comments below, everyone, what you guys think. Will XRP play a role? Will Bitcoin play a role? Will gold play a role? I'd love to hear what you guys think, and appreciate everyone watching. Have a beautiful day. I'm going to go enjoy this time with my daughter now and move around. And yeah, love you guys. Have a great day. Peace.